Hey everyone, this is Mr. Everything, and today I wanted to revisit the Playseat challenge with the custom shifter mount. I actually made a couple of videos on this many years back where I discovered that you could just clamp this onto this like little metal kind of reinforcement there, that little buckle, and it would kind of work. But then I came up with another idea where you just got a piece of wood, or you could just make something out of metal, however you want to fabricate it, and that would kind of hold it that way so it wouldn't. And then I had this comment, which I'll show in a minute, just to better describe where I got the idea of doing something where you would mount something on here, which is much more permanent and heavy duty. And I've seen a few videos, and this is what I came up with, which I really like, so I just wanted to share it. I know that there's a lot of other, not that many, but there are a few other ideas I saw, and this is a different one, same principle, but I just wanted to show how I did it. Okay, so here was the comment. I pinned it on that video, LUD, whatever that is, and you can see what they're saying. You use a bar end, which I didn't know what those were, and I went ahead and looked those up, and it looked perfect, and they were cheap, like $10. You had to get a 2-pack unless you found one used. I had those in my watch list on eBay for years. I just never really got into it. I hadn't sim raced much in recent years, but this is where I got this idea from several years ago. And for Yowzo or whatever, I did get a tripod, so there you go. Now, from what I've seen on a few other videos, I didn't see anyone actually use the bar ends. I saw one video. There were some other ones with more fabrication involved, but I wanted to avoid doing that. I just wanted something to clamp on it because that was kind of what the bar end idea was. One guy looked like, I don't know what exactly it's called, like a pipe ring or some type of coupler almost that goes around it for like a hanger that you can thread a little bar into to hang your pipe. And I like the idea of just getting that cheap ring at the hardware store. But what I didn't like was you have to basically run a threaded piece of metal into it, and you obviously can't mount this shifter on a little piece of metal. It would just never work. So you'd have to get a block of wood and then get a little, I'm not sure what that were, like hangers or something to hold the block onto the metal. So it was just a little more work than I wanted to do. So I thought the first thing I want to try is with the bar ends. And there was a set on eBay that I was going to get, but I decided I would go to my Walmart first and check, and they didn't have any. But what I ended up getting, which is what I went with, is this bike rack, which kind of uses the same principle, but just in a different capacity. And there's the UPC. I don't know if your phone could scan that or whatnot, but I found that at my local Walmart. And here's the actual listing on Walmart's website. Hopefully I'll remember to put it in the description. It's only $15, so it's about the same price after shipping as a bar end on eBay would be. And my concern with those would be some are way too long because they probably need cut, and they're made out of aluminum. And they're round, so again, you can't clamp onto something round, so it would have to be flattened. And being aluminum, I don't know if you could just put it in a vise and crank it. If you sandwich it too much, you might split the aluminum, so I thought maybe you'd just pound it a little bit. But that again involved some thinking and maybe some trial and error. So when I got this, I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but since it was Walmart, I was like, well, if it doesn't, I won't cut it up and I'll take it back. And you can see I already have flat surfaces to work with, so nothing needs modified there. And it has that same clamp idea, but it's way beefier and bigger than what a little bar end would be. And that's how it would work on a bike, but there's that. So there were a few modifications that I needed to make here. And this one, again, since it's beefier, it uses 2, which I find to be better. 2 points to tighten it down at, but it takes up way more room because you can only go so far here because this little brace, so it welds on here, so just can't go any further back. And then this, you'll notice would get in the way. It wouldn't go back on. But it's a really hard, durable plastic, but it is very easy to cut. So I just had a little hacksaw and cut it short. You can kind of see where it would have said the P, and then it was a little bit longer. It was maybe, I don't know, maybe that much I cut off, and then I tried to sand it on a block a little bit. I feel if you had a bandsaw or something, it would have been way easier and cleaner of a cut. But these pop off. I'm not sure if mine was glued and the glue broke off, or if it was never glued and I glued it years ago. But just be careful not to break it. But when you pop that off, you can slide this or bar end or whatever you want to do. Slide that on. And the problem was this would be up here. So then you have to have it to where that little peg on here and the peg on this have to ride in that groove. So that's why I had to cut it to make that adjustment. Now, being made for the back post or frame of a bike, it was a larger diameter than what a bar end would be. And you get 3 of these little spacers. I think they're all the same thickness, but they're a little bit longer, and I guess that'd be circumference, so they could fit within each other. And 2 would allow this to not tighten down, because you can't get these too tight. They kind of pinch more toward the end and not toward the middle, so it's not a good design. So I needed to try and get the right thickness. 3, it wouldn't go on. 2 was a little loose, so I ended up getting just some shelf liner, or probably even like an inner tube, or something rubber and kind of thin. And it was good to line it with rubber anyway, because then that'll help keep it from ever wanting to slide, even if it was tight with that rubber grip on it now. And then these little edges were made to kind of stick out, so that way you could pull them back out. But again, you don't have any space to have any more clearance, so I had to get a razor blade on the 2 I used and cut this little ridge off, so that way they sit inside of this. Hopefully you would know what I mean if you want to do this, but when you get to that point, you'd realize that on your own anyway. And again, from that picture of the listing, I think you can get this is what it would look like with it. This is how I dry fit it, make sure everything would work before I wanted to cut it. And you can see it sticks out quite far. This is actually nice, and this is all aluminum. This is nice and sturdy. It'd be kind of nicer if it could be like that, then you could use it as a tray for a keyboard or just for other accessories. But to do it this way, it'll be fixed on here like this. And in my situation, the Playseat needs to fit, in a tight space. And that's the whole point of it, when you don't have space for a dedicated rig to be there. So I can't keep this. That would just stick out and look horrible. But I was thinking you could actually keep this on if you wanted to, and this would be a great place to put a button box. You could probably either fasten it here or maybe put it up top or some other accessory. So if you don't want to cut it, then you would basically need to do no modification aside from making this accommodate this. If you wanted to leave this whole thing on here, you could do all kind of stuff with it. So I thought I would just include that. You could mount a button box, or you kind of use it as a tray or something else. And although I do have to say, if you're into button boxes, you're obviously on PC, and you probably have more of a budget and more time dedicated to sim racing. So you're probably going to want a bigger build than a Playseat challenge anyway. But for some reason, if you do use one with higher end setup, you could leave this on. And then to cut this, I have a reciprocating saw with some metal blades, and that would have been probably not as clean. But I was telling my dad about it, and he had a hacksaw and told me that'd be the way to do it. So I just let him use one of his, and it came out really nicely. So I made sure to get myself a nice good hacksaw. It took probably 15 minutes to do a good clean cut. At least this is all hollow, but it came out nice. And so you can do it with a hand tool. You don't have to, and you can get more precise without having to use a powered tool. And then after having this, I really don't want to throw it away, because it's a nice kind of, you could use it for something, I'm sure. I was trying to think, because I don't have enough room here because of the lip on this, but I was thinking if there was a way that you could add some rake to your pedals. And I don't remember how I did this, it's actually, again, this lip, but the way I had it, I think I had the pedals a little further back. Or maybe I did it like this. That was how I had it. That will add a little bit of rake to your pedals. And with how this is set up, I don't see how that would go forward, but it does cause the whole pedals to wobble a little bit. But potentially, if you wanted to invest the time, you could probably weld it or attach it to this base if you wanted. So I haven't done it. I tried it like that, and it was okay, but I kind of went back to the way it was. It didn't make much of a difference. But I just figured, since there's no default pedal rake, you'd have to build something. You could just use that if there's no other use for it, and go ahead and secure it to that, and then you would have a way to add rake without spending any more money. So I just thought I'd include that as well. So one of the things I did was I added more of that shelf liner. I just double-sided taped it on here. I think this is actually powder coated, so I didn't want to mess it up. It's pretty nice. I didn't want to try and like etch it or do something for a little more grip. So I just got that shelf liner, and it's holding. It doesn't make a world of difference, but just didn't hurt to add it either. And you can see the welds are actually pretty good. This thing feels pretty sturdy. The size of this is a little bit bigger. I'm pretty sure a G27 or whatever, they're all the same shifter, the G series. I feel like it would probably accommodate this, and I'm not sure how Fanatic shifters clamp. I know they can be hard mounted, and you could hard mount if you drilled into this, but it'd be more permanent, and I want it to be where I can take it back off and just put the shifter somewhere else to save space. And if you did want to hard mount a shifter, I feel like you'd probably have to cut an access hole in this somewhere, so that way you could get to the bolt heads. So I don't know, it might weaken it, and it might not have as much strength without being a fully enclosed kind of tube. It is hollow. And since you have like this little license plate thing, you didn't really have to worry about filing out the cut too much, because you can just put this over it, and you could probably even run some wires or some zip ties through that for cable management, or if you want to hang anything else off that. And again, I mean, I've got this down pretty tight. It's not going anywhere, and there's no flex in it at all. You can't get these super tight. I did, because the more you go back and forth, you can see shaving, so cause it's all aluminum, you don't want to strip them out, because then you're done, unless you could get a bolt, and a longer bolt, and then a nut or something to sandwich it that way. But so I didn't want to tighten them too much until the final fit. I probably won't be taking it back apart. You could mount it the other way if you wanted to flip it, but then these would be at the bottom, because I don't think these washers can seat in on that side, and it's easier to, if you would want to take it off, to get to them up here than down there. And I kind of prefer it coming in than going that way. And I left it longer in case you would want to mount the shifter out this way, out further. I don't think I'm going to, though. It's fine the way it is. But why cut the whole thing off when it doesn't add too much more to it? And there is a wee little bit, like if you push it, but for the most part, I haven't noticed it wanting to go anywhere. Especially in the forward gears, it's not. And again, you could hard mount it, but it would take probably a little more figuring out to get to those bolts. But for what I use it for, and I don't shift that hard in a race, I don't see any issues. I'm not racing, obviously, but I mean, don't really see much of an issue with it. And then in a race, I probably don't shift that hard. And generally, when you're using an H pattern, it's not as fast of a vehicle anyway. So to do like an instant shift isn't really necessary. But I find it to be just fine. And you could mount it this way, And then you can obviously unscrew this and put this however you want. Now, I haven't even tested it this way, but if you wanted, you could mount it at this angle. I don't think it would, I don't even know if you could actually even spin this to take this off. You can't, but you could put it a little further out, and then this piece out here would hold that a little better, or you can, I mean, there's a lot of different things without even that much modification that you could do, and you would, but it's, I find that that would be not as natural as coming back here. So again, hopefully you found this helpful. I did probably go a little long, but I just wanted to walk you through all the issues I ran into and then give you some ideas if for some reason you wanted to try it in a different way, and especially if that idea with this piece, if you wanted to try and add it to your pedal deck for some rake. I would recommend this. I mean, the bar ends was a good idea, but it would require some modification. The pipe fitting was a good idea, if you have, especially if you have those parts already in your house. But then you got to come up with a block or some plate to fasten to it. So if your local Walmart has it, or you could get it online, then I would recommend going with this, because there's really no, aside from one clean cut, which is all you need to do, and then a little bit of fooling around to get those spacers to clamp down on this. I think it's 22 millimeter, whatever it is. It's the same diameter as what a bike handlebar would be, and that would be the way I would go. There's no other modifications needed, and it already accommodates this shifter and probably most shifters that just use a nice good clamp. So I think out of the other videos I made, this is by far the most permanent, durable, and this should be basically the final stage. I think this is as good as I can get it, and this will just be the way I'll use it from now on. I would like to get a bigger rig. I just don't have a space for it, and I haven't done sim racing too much up until recently again. Playseat's definitely a little tight. It could be, if they'd make a bigger one, that'd be great. But for as long as I have it, this is the way I'm going to be doing it now. And I think it would be, if you want to add a shifter, this is probably the way to go. So hopefully that gives you some inspiration, some ideas, and help you out with your Playseat challenge rig. So thanks for watching, and you'll see me in the next one. Have a good one.